Well, good morning. I'm glad you were able to make it back this morning. We had some great entertainment last night, and it's good to see all of you here this morning. Again, Mickey, thank you so much for breakfast. I am tomorrow morning, I'm going to be at a loss. I'm going to want to get in my car and drive south for breakfast again. But thank you. Sunday morning at this conference I always thought is the best time because it's an opportunity for us to digest what we've heard over the preceding day. And I know that means this morning's task is going to be particularly difficult because we heard some very interesting things yesterday, and I'm still trying to muddle through that. That's my mind. My mind tends to muddle. But what Professor Heddle, she said an awful lot in the short time that she talked. And so there's a lot to digest there, and that's just only one of a number of excellent presentations, but today is our opportunity to try to digest that and get some sense of what it means for us collectively and our respective organizations, what we want to do with that knowledge and that perspective over the next 12 months, individually and collectively, but even more importantly then, what perhaps that might mean for where we want to take this conference next year. This time, this is the first time we've introduced this this part of the conference where we're projecting it out across the web. That's a completely new aspect of it. Obviously, we'll be interested in hearing what you think about that because we want to develop that more. We want it to grow more. And just by way, I'm told for this to become a permanent link through YouTube, we need 100 subscribers. So make sure that over the next day, you subscribe to that YouTube channel, and we will obviously promote it through the Detroit Scots, but if you, through your respective organizations, can promote people to subscribe to that, we can get our 100 subscribers, and we will get that link up on the Scottish North American Leadership Conference website as well, because then the proceedings of yesterday, Friday night and yesterday, will be up there for viewing across on the web as well. So that's a new aspect of the conference, and we will want to build on that next year. And as we saw this yesterday, we began to realize all of the potential that gave us and how we can build on this conference going forward. So as you discuss that, keeping that in mind, that's another aspect that we would certainly love to hear your suggestions and reactions to. But I'm going to turn the mic over to Gus Noble. Gus has kind of led this discussion, at least during my time with this conference, and I think has helped us all in the past work our way through this discussion to help crystallize our thoughts. So Gus, this is your microphone, and so have at it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please forgive me if I move slowly this morning. We were playing music until the early hours this morning. Sean plays very well. That must never see the light of day. There's video evidence of some of the songs we're playing. Once again, I'd like to thank John and the Detroit Scots for everything they've done for this conference and for us all in the room today. Wonderful hospitality, wonderful program, great entertainment, great food, and we appreciate it very, very much. Thank you. There was such a lot that we covered yesterday. The theme we grappled with, I think, from my side, we must never say job done, tick, box ticked. We have engaged the next generation. That's like painting the Forth Road Bridge. As soon as you're finished at one end, you must begin again. It's an enduring job that we must always be mindful to do. So how does that impact how we feel about the discussions yesterday, and how does that impact what we must do in the future? From my side, I'm reminded of, I was telling John last night about a board retreat that we had in Chicago. We came together as a board at a really interesting time in the history of the Illinois St. Andrews Society, an organization that does two things. It promotes Scottish culture, as we all do, but we also run a nursing home as our principal charitable mission. That's why we have a 501c3 designation. And the board, frankly, was riven in two. We had seen that most of the residents of this nursing home, the Scottish home, came from a primary market area, which was about 10 zip codes around North Riverside, where the home is located. Most of the people, therefore, that lived there were not Scottish. They were Scottish by inclination. We made them Scottish, but they were not members of the society. There were people who chose to live in this community. And the thing that drove a wedge between the board was the question that the board asked of themselves, and they said, is it for a Scottish cultural organisation to run a nursing home in the western suburbs of Chicago for people who are not Scottish? It's a reasonable enough question. The other side of the board said this has become, through these 100 years, or 170 years, our principal purpose. It's our duty to run this nursing home. And without it, we are simply an organisation that has fun and wears kilts and wears the real meaning of service. So I watched the board argue amongst itself, and I was pretty new in the organisation at the time. It was like watching a tennis match, and I thought, oh my God, where are we headed here? And there was one person who was newer than me on the board, and he sat like me watching this tennis match of an argument, and I looked at him and I could tell he wanted to speak. He'd remained in silence all day long, and he asked a question which, in the middle of or between one of the very loud songs that Sean and I played last night, I asked of myself, and I'm going to ask it of you today, and maybe it will help, maybe it won't, as we think of what we discussed yesterday and how we organically evolve this conference to next year. And what I mean by organically involve is every year this Sunday session is an opportunity to us to reflect on what has been and to make sure the theme or the direction that we head in next is informed by the discussion of the last 24 hours. So let me get back to that question. He said, what we are arguing about here is are we an organization that exists to serve needy Scots? Or are we an organization that exists to serve the needy in a Scottish way? And all of a sudden, when he asked this question, light bulbs went on around the room above everyone's heads, and they said, okay, we get it. That's who we are. So the question I asked myself between those songs we were performing last night was, are we organizations that exist to educate, entertain, engage the Scottish community, or are we organizations that exist to educate, entertain, and engage the community in a Scottish way? Is there an answer there that helps us with the theme we were talking about yesterday? I don't have the answer, but I'd like to think that we have some brain power and some energy in this room that might help us get close to an answer. So with that, John, perhaps we could get everyone's thoughts. And generally on a Sunday, what we do is we ask everyone to give their thoughts on the proceedings from the previous day, and then we'll have a discussion about where we head from here. Mr. Chairman, may I hand it back to you to run that discussion?
Sure, and let me start that out. Let me give my 2 cents worth, because I was part of that discussion last night, and on my way home I kept asking myself, well, what is this Scottish way that Gus was talking about? And I can recall on Sundays when my family would go to church, my dad was very insistent that we be quiet, that we be behaved, and if we weren't, there would always be a moment of reckoning. And at that moment of reckoning, I remember my father's quote was that this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. And is that the Scottish way? But in all seriousness, when you said that, what came to my mind, because again, what sticks in my mind about this conference is Professor Huddle, and the other image that kind of came, John, and I think you'll recall this, was Andrew Morrison at the Casca caucus event a year ago at Linville, Grandfather Mountain, talking about. He was trying to talk about, I think, in his way, the Scottish way, that land ownership in the Highlands was a communal thing, that the chief held the clan property as on behalf of the community. It wasn't the chief's property. It was the community's property that the chief held for the purposes and the benefit of the community. And then lo and behold, the Normans came in and disrupted that whole notion of how property was held and owned and distributed, and changed the whole thing. And he talked about then, what was the nature of Scottish heritage based upon that communal notion of land ownership. And so then I was seeing then that picture of Dr. Huddle talking about the genetic memory, and so all of a sudden, the Scottish way, that it's a communal, that service, that if you were trying to deliver a service in a Scottish way, you understand that as part of a community, you have responsibility to the community, and that was part of what you were trying to do as a Scot, was as a member of the community trying to fulfill your community responsibility, that you just can't ignore what is happening around you because it's part and parcel of who you are. So I mean, that's kind of something. And I guess I would, if that is part of who I am, if that's part of my genetic memory, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. And perhaps I would like to hear a little bit more than the 10 minutes that Dr. Heddle had yesterday. And I would like to know perhaps some of what her colleagues who explore the same notions have to say about that. So that's kind of my initial reaction. If Bob, do you have a?
Well, I totally agree with you. I love to smell her grandmother's soup. I mean, it must have been fabulous when you think about it. But I thought she was exceptional. I totally agree with you, John. I think that, so the question you're asking here is, how do you travel through life along the Scottish way? We don't credit ourselves enough, I don't think, for how wonderful it really is to be on that road. We think that we think we're proud. We like our heritage. We like our culture. We like our music, but we don't boast enough about it. Somebody has to say, "Oh, you're a Scot, aren't you?" Well, yes, I am. And instead of saying, "Boy, I'm a Scot," so I think that kind of came out yesterday when I looked at. I was so proud of all the people who were performing and so forth. I said, that's my heritage. That's my culture. I'm so proud of that. I wish I could bottle that up and send it out to people, but it's really impossible. No, I did really. I felt overwhelmed by Dr. Huddle. I wish she was one of my advisors in college. She blew me away. She really did, because every concept she had was just exceptional. I think that there's so many things that were brought up yesterday that I think we can all take back to what we do, and that is how we approach Highland games, how we approach using music in our various events, and I think how we need to emphasize more how proud we are of what we are, who we are, and our associations with others. We need to encourage, when we find a Scot, we need to encourage them to delve in deeper and take a deep dive. But I totally agree with you that this has been a very impactful conference, and I appreciate everything the organizers did to put this thing together. Yeah.
I was afraid of this. Okay. I'm Bob's wife, Louise, and for those of you who don't know me, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend yesterday morning. I didn't get the benefit of Dr. Huddle's presentation, but I know that I will be looking at it on the YouTube channel if it's archived there. But I just jotted down a couple of thoughts, John and Gus, as you were speaking about doing things in the Scottish way, sharing. And I was thinking back about last night and that wonderful performance, and my dear relative Mary wasn't able to attend, but she bought a CD this morning so she could get some of the flavor. And I thought, we had a nice crowd here last night. I just wish it had been bigger. And I thought, well, how could we do that? I know we advertised it, or we sent out an email to our membership saying, even if you didn't go to the leadership conference, you can come to the Saturday night. We have these two wonderful entertainers going to play for us, and we're going to have some of the scholarship students perform, and Dave Martin. And I thought, we have a lot of people come to our Kilgore Center for the fish fries, and they love hearing our music. They're not all Scottish. Wouldn't it have been wonderful if we'd say advertise this and said, come, pay your whatever it was we were charging people, $15 at the door? We would have filled this place. We would have had a ceilidh. We would have rocked the rafters, kind of like they do on the Isle of Egg. That would have been fun. And so would that have been part of a Scottish leadership conference? If we were sharing our Scottish heritage, reaching out to the community, and maybe even recruiting some new members, that wouldn't be so bad. And I wondered too, even the whole conference, certainly it was centered on Scots, but if we had opened it to the public, you don't have to be a Scot if you're interested, if we'd advertised it, why not? It would have been wonderful for people who are interested in some of the ethnic groups in the country and what they have to offer. That's my thoughts.
My name is Mary Margaret Block, and I'm a relatively new member to St. Andrews, about a year and a few months. And I couldn't be more proud of my heritage and proud of myself that I took the steps to become part of this organization. And I do have to say to Louise, I would have not been here had it been for the fact that the last meeting, she said something about you don't have to be a leader in the organization to join the conference. That really spoke to me because I felt like I just want to be immersed in this organization and learn more about my culture, my history, my ancestors, what their habits, what their culture, what their food, was. But the comment that really struck me was the comment that the gentleman made in your meeting about the inclusiveness and the exclusivity. I think it's appropriate that people that belong to St. Anne or any Scottish organization keep the culture, keep the link, the Scottish link, the Scottish heritage in the main membership. But the Scottish way can be the outreach. And I think that that's really important for someone to say, well, you don't have to be Scots to go to the games. You don't have to be Scots to stay at the senior home, because they welcome. And I think that that's a big deal, to show yourself that not only do you stand for something in the organization, that you're a member and that you do have the Scottish lineage, but that you're stretching that out to the greater community. And therefore, people learn from experience. They say, oh, I like the Scots. I like what they stand for. I'm extremely impressed with the meetings, the content of the meetings, the fact that so many things can, from a professional standpoint, I know so many things can get goofed up in webcams and in video, especially across the water, that for there to be little or no glitches in any of that was truly impressive. So from a new, they deserve it. And I think I mentioned that to you. I was really impressed. But the other cultural part, and I'm sort of going on and on, but the other cultural thing that I saw was in the Chelsea House Orchestra. I think the leader said that they weren't all Scots, but if you look at their faces and their enthusiasm, they have been enveloped by a commonality, the music, and they love it. And they will grow up. I don't care if they're Polish or Russian or whatever they really are genetically, they're going to grow up with that Scots warmth in their hearts. And what a great thing. So I think we can do that.
Somebody once said to me, there are 3 types of people in the world. There are Scots, there are people who want to be Scots, and there are people with no ambition whatsoever.
Very good, I like that. My name is Kathy Hassey. I'm chairman of the Highland Games in Livonia, which are the oldest Highland Games, continuous Highland Games in North America. If you haven't been, I hope I will see you next August. The purpose of the Highland Games is obviously to raise some money, but more importantly, I think it's really to share our heritage, our culture, our music, our art. And I think at the games, we really do a good job of this. We get about at least 11,000 people through our gate. We have a big ceilidh the night before. And I was telling Rory yesterday, I think after, say, 8 o'clock on Friday night at our ceilidh, probably there's not too many people that are over 35 years old. And I think, it's the young people that come, they want to stay, they love the music, they love the culture. They'll go off, and our merchandise vendors are open. They might buy a Glengarry or a kilt pin or something. The next year they come out, yeah, maybe I'll buy a kilt. And then I've got to have someplace to wear the kilt. So then they maybe get more interested in coming to a Burns night, coming to St. Andrew's night, coming to our Tartan Day, because they're kind of casual activities. They like that. And I think that we can grow our membership and continue growing our culture and our traditions through the young people. We've got to grab them, some way. And I think that this is how, we're really trying to do it. But, having a tangible cultural heritage, that's really, like Dr. Heddle said yesterday, that's really an important issue. And I think we really all have to, do this. Certainly my generation and the couple of generations behind me, to get these young people and to get them. The young people that performed last night were phenomenal. And the young people on Friday night, one of the young fiddlers on Friday night, he plays with one of the major entertainment bands that we have at our games, Crossbow. And, that's a great, so he's getting his generation, and, he's young. He's not even old enough to drink at the games. But he comes and he loves it, and that's a fun thing. And he was so excited that the Chelsea House Orchestra was going to perform here, and that, he could make that connection with the band he's in. So we have to, keep doing that. So
the theme of the conference that we've grappled with over the years has evolved. Of course, we've had. I think back to some of the themes. One of them was Scottish American 2.0. Our faces are changing, but our values remain. And one of them was establishing an effective transatlantic dialogue. And it seems to me that as a concept still exists. All of these themes are still relevant. But if you think about establishing an effective transatlantic dialogue, what if we were to think about the dialogue happening not just across an ocean, but across time? So establishing an effective transgenerational dialogue still works. One of the things I wanted to say last night, we joked and said, well, what is the Scottish way? And I remember there was a writer came through Chicago, and she asked me the question in a joking way. She said, what does that mean? You say it like you're some sort of Scottish Jedi Knight. So we said, what if the theme for next year was, do you want to be a Scottish Jedi? And I say that only half joking. I think a theme that really engages and stops people in their tracks and says, what does that mean? I want to be part of that. So please let me know what you think.
I'm Linda Young-Chico from Clan Young, and I come to this conference with a different perspective than many of you because I am part of the leadership of one clan. So we have a little different objective in that we're trying to get leadership together who are in all parts of the country and in some respects all parts of the world. So looking at how we can bring the leadership, the Scottish way, and bring that to everybody from different parts of the world. Primarily, we get together at Highland Games, and once a year we come together as a United States group, but how do we get all of us together? And I particularly like the idea, because our leadership is getting older, I like the idea of how do we help them help the younger people get involved? How do we get our older members, leaders, former leaders, to get together with the younger people and get them involved? Because we're not seeing that. We're not seeing the younger people step up in a leadership role, and that's our goal. And it's harder to do when you're trying to deal with Colorado, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, Michigan. So it's a much more difficult task when we can figure out how to all come together as leaders in one place. And that's our challenge. It's a little bit different.
John Belisai has been such a force behind the evolution of and growth of this conference, and I want to just take a moment to say how much I appreciate and I'm grateful for John's leadership, John's energy, the time John takes to do what you do, not just for this conference, but for COSCA. And COSCA as an organization is one of our co-hosts. So to you, John, I offer sincere thanks, and to COSCA and your colleagues there, a debt of gratitude.
Thank you, Gus. After you hear what I have to say, you may take a different view. I'm troubled, and it's got nothing to do with SNALC. I'm troubled on a bigger level because I think we in the Scottish American community are in danger of losing our way. If we try to be everything to everybody, we will end up no different from anybody else and any other organization that has an open heart and an inclusive worldview. And I argue with the Scottish government people and Scots from Scotland about this all the time, when they're very happy with the fact that their referendum allowed Pakistanis and Poles who have moved to Scotland, who they view as Scots, to vote in that, but Scots who are out of the country, native Scots, in America, for example, physically in America, were not allowed to vote. So their view of what it means to be a Scot is in tension with what our view of being a Scot is. I mean, Scottish Americans, right? They have a hard time understanding the hyphenated American entities that we all are, because we're all mixtures of different races and ethnicities, and that's a good thing. But we can't be everything to everybody. So I think the choice that you posed is kind of a false choice. I certainly understand why for the Illinois St. Andrews Society and what you're doing with the Scottish Home, you needed to make that choice. But I don't think we in SNALC or in COSCA or in our local organizations need to make that choice. I think we have to be both. And that means that we have to be a place for people who self-identify as Scots, to feel that that's their home. I mean, you look around, we have African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, Polish Americans, German Americans. We are, for better or worse, going through a time where everybody is looking to belong somewhere. And I think that that is an important human trait. We're social animals, but we're also very much tribal. That's got a dark side, as we know, but it also has a positive side. My view is colored by the fact that I'm a member of a St. Andrews Society, which is genealogy-based. You have to prove your Scottish connection. I'm a member of a clan society, which is genealogy-based. You have to prove your McGregor connection. That's natural for me. It's also easy for me because it was my grandfather who emigrated. And the further away you get from the Scottish immigration experience, the less you probably immediately draw on it, but it doesn't mean you don't need it. Our St. Andrews Society in Washington has a lot of younger members. They've come in with their genealogy proof, and we've made it easier for them to do that, but they do it. That's part of the role we play. So I would hate to see SNALC and COSCA and our St. Andrews societies try to be everything to everybody. Now, how do we do that? It's not easy. I think if we are so inward looking that we're insular, like a lot of us used to be, that isn't going to take us anywhere, because the 21st century requires a different kind of worldview, a different kind of belonging, a different kind of welcoming. I mean, the future of this conference is online in many ways, so we have to be open to that and meet younger people where they are. But I don't think that means that we surrender the basics of what it means to be Scottish American. You know, and at the same time that we're dealing with this and everybody's online, everybody wants to belong. Look at the importance of DNA analysis to most people. They want to know if they're a Scot. Now, what they do with that is another matter, and we can help them with that through education. But I think we will lose an important something if we say, well, everybody's welcome. Everybody is welcome, but there's got to be a special place, and several special places, for the Scottish American community. Self-identified, but people who know they're Scots and have a reason for valuing that. So does that mean that it's got to color everything we do? No. But there is a tension with the Scottish government about this. And I mean, they gave us $7,500 for this conference. This conference would not have been possible without their support. And they're always here, and the new Scottish administration is much easier to deal with than it has been in recent years. But what they want is different from what we want, and it's got to be it's got to be handled diplomatically. But we can't accept the view that Scotland is over there, we're over here, they're Scots, we're not, because then what's the point? You know. So that's my thought on the matter.
I agree, John. I'm not advocating for a change of any of the ways that we all run our respective organizations. I ask a question that I don't have an answer for. And this is exactly why I value the Sunday morning of the leadership conference, because we get these discussions out in the air and we really get to hear from one another. A few years ago, 2009, there was the first year of homecoming, and many of us were back in Scotland for the Scottish Diaspora Forum that they had at the Scottish Parliament. I was asked to present as part of something called the Dragon's Den, which I thought, this is going to be really cheesy. It's based on the Dragon's Den. They called it the Dragon's Glen. It's Shark Tank, they call it here in the States, where they have people pitch an idea to some investors for a business, and then the investors choose to take a stake in the business and become supportive of it. And the concept was not cheesy, as it turns out. It was, here's a theme, and there are 5 people pitching around this theme. The ideas that were part of the pitches were folded into government policy and how the Scottish government wrote its engagement strategy for the diaspora. So it turned out into some meaty stuff. The theme was Scotland is a nation of 5 million people, but the international community of Scots is a nation of 50 million people. Sell us a plan to bring them all together. My pitch was based around the mission of the Illinois St. Andrews Society, which had been, we nourish the Scottish identity. I was never comfortable with that mission until we removed the word "the", and then we moved from nourish the Scottish identity to nourish Scottish identity. And immediately we said there is no one singular Scottish identity. It's a matter of your own personal circumstances and how you feel about who you are and your identity and your heritage and so on. And the reason we did that was to recognize that everybody's identity as a Scot is as valid as the next person's, and that the dialogue between Scotland and the Scottish American community must recognize that there is a distinct Scottish American identity. So my point was made to the government that they have to be cognizant and respectful of that identity. So I think this is still it's still in the air, you know. So point well made, John. Thank you. Dave.
Gus, thank you. That last piece you mentioned where you removed the was that a vision or a mission statement for which one?
It is. Our mission is to nourish Scottish identity through service, fellowship, and the celebration of Scottish culture.
Okay. Is there a vision or mission statement for this organization?
Not really.
Okay.
We've talked about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as I was listening to the conversation here, I wrote one. I actually wrote a vision and a mission statement. Forgive me, a few years in the military, we do a lot of military planning, and that's part of it. So just kind of came out. So I propose this for a vision statement, just here in conversation. It's not necessarily something that has to be voted on, just something to think about. Create a North American, transgenerational, Scottish cultural entity. I wanted to say force, but I thought that sounded too militaristic. Entity connected with Scotland and international Caledonian societies to further the Scottish way that emanates across time and place from the Scottish diaspora. It's probably a little too long for vision statement. It can be worked on. So then the mission, a little bit more specific, which as we talked beginning Friday evening, we talked about the, and you brought up here as well again, the education, the entertainment, the engagement. So built upon those three pieces, a mission statement could be, reach our local and national communities with Scottish spirit and warmth to educate them about Scottish values, entertain via the arts of music, dance, language, and food, all while engaging tangibly and interactively in a Scottish way. So, just something to think about. And then for goals, which further breaks it down, I just have a list of ways to engage. We have St. Andrew's societies, we have clans, we have Highland games, and there's many others. We have, you have the nursing home, and goals then could break that down further and more tangibly. So just something to consider. I know at the House of Scotland out in San Diego, I asked one of our board members recently, our treasurer, who's pretty engaged with workings of the House. I said, hey, do we have a vision or mission statement? And he's somewhat familiar with our bylaws. And he said, no, not that he knew of. He hadn't found anything in sort of the front matter of the bylaws, and that's where it would be. It ought to be on the front page. So I think that we have a task to do out there at the House of Scotland as well, because we have lots of great ideas in the room, but we don't have an overarching, at least not that anyone's brought up in the 3 years I've been there, we don't have an overarching statement that then guides, directs, funnels, not only the great ideas that people have, but the ideas that develop in people's heads before they even speak something. If they know, okay, well, this organization has, this is our mission, this is our vision, so their ideas then become refined before being presented by the focus of that particular organization.
Share the
Write that
vision
down?
and mission.
Yes,
with us.
I'll email that out to
you.
folks, yes.
That was very powerful.
Okay, thanks.
Claire, thank you for coming all the way across the Atlantic to join us. I was really encouraged, impressed, inspired by the work you're doing for your community and for the weaving the tartan community over in Scotland. And I look forward to having dialogue with you and your organisation far beyond this conference. Really appreciate you coming. Thank you.
No, for me, it's very humbling to come out here, and thank you very much, Gus. And I suppose that kind of frames not my thoughts. I suppose I just have more questions, in the sense this is completely new to me, and I'm incredibly passionate about heritage and culture. but I'm a Scot living in Scotland, and we have the same issues in some respects, even though we're living in the country. And for me, it's understanding how we can take that shared values and visions of what they are today. And, you know, John, you've touched it, trying to be everything to everyone is an amazing utopian view, but it's about being impactful, you know, and being quite clear. The accountant in me will come out and say, what's our sort of key performance indicators and where do we want to be in 3 years? But I think being a from Scotland, coming out here, you know, overwhelmed every time I do come out to the States, it's how can we help, you know, I think of my great-grandchildren who don't exist yet. You know, you think about your great-grandchildren, and how do we have some role to play today in what their conversation is? And it's how we can use people back home who love what you love and do, and how we can actually strengthen on both sides. So yeah, so it's more of a question to throw into the melting pot. How can you use us, basically? So, but thank you very much for having me. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
You know, Gus, when he read the proposed, his suggestion on a mission statement, it struck me. You know, we keep batting around the conference title. We struggle because the term leadership, it discourages people from participating because they say, oh, that's for somebody else. You know, I'm just an activist. I just a member. Well, you know, I was thinking, oh, okay, Scottish North American Transgenerational Conference. You know, there's a couple terms in there that really more appropriately define what we're talking about than that current topic.
Thank you, John. I'd like to make 2 points. First, I'd like to build on what he talked about in the mission and vision. I think every organization needs that. Long time ago, I heard a great acronym. It's called VMOSCA: Vision, Mission, Objectives, Strategy, Tactics, and Actions. And if you don't have that in your organization, then you're not tying together everything you're doing with your vision and mission. And that's something I was here when it was in Detroit before, and I looked at that and I looked today, and that was something I was going to bring up, is what is the mission, the vision, and the objective of our organization, meeting, and what's it going to take forward. So I would encourage us then, if not at this meeting, at the next meeting, to nail that down, vision, mission, and then that drives everything else I think that we do from that. The second thing is I'd like to challenge all the leaders here. I'm just a member of the organization, but I've been a leader at other organizations previously, and we've had retreats, we've had conferences. At the end of that, we're all high-fiving one another, great enthusiasm, great intention, and then I look back a year later, okay, well, what did we do with it? We kind of lost that. We've had a couple successes, and I'm not saying everybody does, and I look back at the one I was here a couple years ago, and I'm not involved enough in the organization to say what was impacted by that, but you spent all this time here. Is it worth your weekend, worth your time, worth your money? So what I'd like to challenge all the organizations here and our own to set aside time to look at what we learned, and aside from a regular meeting, just don't do it at one of your regular monthly meetings. Set aside time to look and list all your ideas. Pick a couple. To what John said, there's a million things we can do. And if we try to do them all, we get none of them done. But you pick one or two, or at least one, that your organization is going to take on, make a plan, and then share that with your organization. Make yourself accountable to the people that paid for you to be here, or yourself to be accountable, so that you go back to them and say, based on the conference we had last weekend, we're going to take these actions. And then I would like to challenge everybody here for next year, homework. Begin your conference next time. What did each organization do based on what you learned this time? Make yourself accountable, and then come back and you can be proud about what we did. You can share with one another, and from that you can learn from one another's experiences. And I think the bottom line, and this, I always like ending with this, it's an old Hasidic story. And I got this from a book, Dr. Harold Kushner. There's a man traveling through the forest, and he's lost. And he goes one way and can't find his way out, goes another, can't find his way out. And eventually, he runs into another person who's also lost. And he says, you know, you got to help me. I want to get out of this forest. I don't know where to go. And the other person says, well, you know, I'm lost too. But if you and I share what we know with one another, maybe the two of us can find our way out of here. And I think that's what these conferences are all about. We're sharing the ideas we have, make our own organizations better, and find a pathway to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Rod Harris, part of St. Andrews Society. What I wanted to kind of expand on is what Gus had mentioned about the Scottish way and values. I was kind of looking just at our organization and what we do in a Scottish way. In each one of our meetings, we do sponsor a homeless homeless the schools. We will have a sponsorship for that. We'll look at Toys for Tots, the Children's Hospital, those kinds of things. So what we're doing, I think, from a Scottish standpoint, we indirectly affect our whole community by just doing that. The other aspect I'd like to just expand on a little bit is that my family personally, I've involved my children, I've involved my grandchildren. They've been very, very helpful, particularly at our games. Also, it's interesting, the Wee Barons. That's part of the Highland Games that I really, really think is kind of neat. We probably have, 700-800 children go to the Highland Games, and guess what? They bring their parents, obviously, whether they're Scottish or not. They carry that back, and even though they're young and the families are young, they kind of remember that. And when they get older and they get a little bit more time because they're busier than heck while they're growing up and that, I think that they will come back if we can reach out to them at that time and bring them back into our community. Those are my thoughts right now.
Thank you. I'm Maggie McEwen. I'm from Toronto now, Vice President of Scottish Studies Foundation, based in Canada. So first of all, I agree about the title because I was totally intimidated against coming to any of these meetings until I was voted in as president. Now I realize that I could have been enjoying all your companies, for many years. I'm going back to your two initial questions that your facility sort of struggled with. We have a slightly different way of looking at it. We are a fundraising group, and it was initially started to have to start the Centre for Scottish Studies at the University of Guelph. There were 6, perfectly normal businessmen who felt that Scotland needed a position of education, and there was a lot of general Gaelic stuff, or Gaelic stuff, which was mainly Irish, and there were Irish places, but we needed something Scottish, so that's where we're coming from. And we have a slightly different way of looking at it, which makes the decision of what we are and where we're going very much easier for us. We support all things Scottish. And the background on this personally, and I was just looking, I'm the vice president. The president is now living in Scotland, so that's why you get me instead of him. And I run a tow ship sailing which is a fundraiser. And we have a Celtic band, and we have Highland dancers, and we have pipers as education on board. One of our board members, we didn't make very much money this year. So one of our board members was grumbling and saying we shouldn't have the band, they were too expensive, and we can just do without the band. And I sort of grumbled in an email to the president, and I was trying to find his words, but I can't find them on my phone. He came back to me and said, our mandate is to support and encourage all things Scottish. And when I look at it that way, it makes the decision of where we're going much easier, because we don't care who joins as a membership. You can be anything under the sun as long as you are interested in supporting Scottish activities. And in our case, it has to be something mildly academic. But dancing and all the rest of it is acceptable. And music. And that's just a different way of looking at it. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Nicola Phillips. I'm the president of Scottish Club of Tulsa, and I'm also a travel agent specialising in Scottish travel. And over the years, I've been to a lot of different conferences and seminars all over the world. And it's really easy to forget those business cards, to go back home and not follow up with people. And you know, one of the best things I think we can do is be proactive to really make that connection with each other. And you know, it's as we get back home and get back to our busy lives, it's just easy to let things go by the wayside. So send me an email, I'll send you emails, and to keep those connections with each other, I think is very important to our growth as well.
Hi, I'm going to move my chair back. I got some things to say. So I want to bring the discussion back to how do we get the next generation involved? And I think, I'll be honest, I'm going to be real blunt here. You guys missed the mark not having me be a speaker, because I am the owner of a 70-year-old third-generation business, and if anyone knows a thing or two about how to pass the torch along in a successful way, it's me. And it's been a struggle, and it's had its highs, it's had its lows, and I'm more than happy to talk about all of the things from the low to the highs and everything in between. I have so many thoughts running through my head right now that I'm not, like, this is why I wanted to be able to speak, but I didn't even know about the conference until Jerry called up to order haggis from us, and I happened to answer the phone, and he told me why he was ordering it. So I would love to be more involved in the Scottish, in the St. Andrews Society. I can't prove that I'm Scottish. I am Ackroyd Scottish Bakery is an influential part of the Scottish community, not just in the Detroit area. We are one of very few Scottish businesses that make Scottish food in the entire nation. We ship nationwide. We have a really loud voice, and we know how to use it. And we know how we can't just focus on Scottish people. That is not how this business is going to get us through to the next generation and the next generation after that. Our goal is to get, not everyone, sure, no, anyone that's interested in learning about Scottish culture through food, mostly food, and the wonderful gifts that we sell there. But I could never keep this business going the way my grandfather did, which was to just focus on Scottish people. That's all he had to do. There were a lot more Scots back then. It's really hard for me to hear people talking about you need to, like, prove your blood and all of that, because it's tone deaf. If you want the next generation to be a part of this, the next generation doesn't want to be part of what is, to me, it's really hard for me to see this as anything other than racist. It just feels racist to me. And I have a really hard time with that. And so does my generation, and the generation after that, and the generation after that. They are well more accepting and open and open-minded and just woke. And most of you probably don't even know what that means. So I think that it's really a big disservice to your organization to exclude people that can't prove that they're Scottish, because my heart is Scottish. My heart has other stuff in it too, but it's mostly Scottish. I live and breathe it every single day. And my right-hand person is my half Italian, half Lebanese partner that I'm not married to, but we have a baby. And he is wonderful. And without him, our business would not be it wouldn't be doing, I mean, every single year we are doing better and better. We're focused on the future. We're focused on growth. I was nominated for top 50 businesses in Michigan to watch in 2019. I'm doing something right. We're doing something right. And I really do think that a big part of that is that we stop and we talk to the people that we want to involve in our community, and we listen to them and we hear what they think. And to ask someone to say that social media is how you get the next generation involved is all fine and good, but you know, a 50-year-old person using Facebook and Snapchat is not how you're going to get the 20 and 30-year-olds involved. people need to not just use social media, but they also need to use it correctly and effectively. I really think that there's, and I also think there's a reason that and like I said, so many thoughts, but we've been putting on different events over the last year, and they've been really successful, and I think there's a reason for that, and they're not all Scottish people, and it's all about sharing what we do, sharing great food, sharing great times, great music, great dancing with everyone, to be able to have them be part of it. Like you said, I was so excited that Friday night, that Kaylee, there was so much energy in the whole grounds. It just took over Greenmead. But where is that the rest of the year? Why weren't they here last night? The talent and the fun happening on the stage was kind of lost here. It wasn't totally lost. I think everyone here appreciated it, but there could have been so many more bodies here, so many more feet tapping and hands clapping, and I just think there's something that's being missed, and a big part of that is really figuring out how to get to that next generation by stepping out of your own way and letting the next generation tell you what they need. My grandpa didn't step out of the way. He fell, he knocked his head over, and I took the checkbook, and that's how we we were gonna die, and things weren't going well. And now our business is up 75% since the time I took over. And I have no problem patting myself on the back because I think I'm doing something right. And I really want to be able to collaborate more with the St. Andrews Society. I think there's been a big gap in that, and it's frustrating to me. But I also don't love, it's a big sticking point for me that I have to prove that I'm Scottish when I'm so Scottish, and my husband is more Scottish than most of the Scottish people coming into the bakery. Or I call him my husband because it's just easier. My partner's more, he knows more about Scottish culture than half of our customers that come in that say they're Scottish and are looking to learn more about culture, which works out well because he's then able to share. But I don't know. I guess my whole thing is every day we tell everyone that comes in the bakery who says, "Oh, I'm not Scottish. Well, what am I doing in here? Come, learn, try our food. Let us tell you about the history of our bakery and the history of our of the Scottish people, the history of the food here." And without making everyone feel welcome and involved, then I don't think we would be up 75%. Oh, you want me to out myself? Because I already sort of did. My family is mostly English, but we've done a really good job owning a Scottish bakery, so I don't care anymore. My grandma confessed that to me recently. I think that maybe one of my grandfather's parents was Scottish. I'm not sure. He never talked about them. They died when he was 13, so it was very traumatic for him, so he never wanted to talk about it. But I'm learning more and more about the history of my family after my grandfather died, actually. So, I asked my dad last night, is the reason that they never joined the St. Andrews Society maybe because Grandpa didn't think he could trace his lineage properly? And the answer was there was just too many societies back then, and he didn't want to have to pick and choose one, which is not a thing now. Yeah. We are, yeah, and even if we are, and it feels a lot better to include people than to exclude people for me, and that's why I sometimes have I always have a hard time with the exclusive nature.
So how were you inspired by your grandfather? Why was it you that took over?
Yeah. I was inspired by carrying on the tradition of what we have and carrying on this part of our culture. And we have an incredibly enthusiastic customer base, and I felt a sense of obligation to those people. And I also know that I knew that I could do it. I could carry on the tradition and also bring some innovation to it. And I think that I guess my whole point is every day I recognize in my business, if you don't innovate, you die. And I think that applies to businesses. I think it applies to your own personal success. And I also think it could apply to organizations that are not for profit.
Yeah.
I grew up working in, my dad owned a separate location from where we're at now. I grew up in that business there. I started waiting on people when I was so young that some customers would tell me I wasn't allowed to wait on them. They decided because I was too little, but I knew what I was doing. Yeah, and I went away for probably about 10 years to come back. I went away with no intention of coming back, and then I felt it in my heart that I wanted to come back, and I wanted to be part of this. So, my comments were very long and went in a lot of different directions.
I think your point about innovation is a really good one. We have, as one of our 3 core values at the Chicago Scots, a belief in enterprise and innovation. And I think you're absolutely right. If you don't innovate, you will die on the vine. You have to constantly be respectful of those core values, which will never change. But by having that as a root, you can chime with the times and be relevant to what's around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our motto is traditionally Scottish, authentically Ackroyds. And we did that so that we could maintain those traditional Scottish roots and also be able to innovate because it's necessary.
Right.
So thanks for listening. Sorry I talked for so long, but
I appreciate it.
I have a lot on my mind.
That's why I love these workshops, these conferences, because you get to hear from other people besides the usual. And I've been going to these a number of years. I'm Bart Forbes. I'm actually nothing now. I'm not a leader of anything, which is great. As much as it kills me, I really do agree with John Belisai in many things. I come from a place of love. On 2 particular points, we need to be bold as Scottish Americans because we are a new kind of person. I think it gets to what you're saying. We're Scottish by choice. I'm also half English, but I've chosen this. I have a connection to this. The other challenge we have is what does it mean to be Scottish? Because we had a discussion with Rory, and he was saying that, for example, he saw it as a bit of cultural appropriation. If you don't embrace the entire political platform of the Scottish government, then how can you be calling yourself Scottish? And gets to the point that John was saying about, well, the Turks, Pakistanis, they're all Scottish. But it gets down to what do we want to do with that? And I know that Camilla's really keen on importing Scottish culture. And the discussion we had with Jamie last night, well, why don't you import all Scottish music, Scottish punk, rock, folk? We have to decide what elements of Scottish culture we want to provide. Otherwise, as John pointed out, we actually dilute the brand. And we can't be everything to everybody, but we as Scottish Americans have to be bold and decide that's what we want to support. And this also goes to the point of how do we preserve whatever we decide is Scottish culture? Do we just preserve it, conserve it? Or we see the amazing innovation of weaving tartan in the Highlands? We had this discussion last night. We can't just preserve it in glass and amber, but we continue to create traditions based on what we feel is our Scottish culture. I mean, one of the ongoing traditions in the St. Andrews Society of Washington, D.C. is the kirking. Well, it was new once. And now it's a tradition. We have to take that culture and extend it into the next generation. And that comes to another point of the old saying, do you want to give a person fish or teach them how to fish? Do we want to bring in Scottish entertainment for a night of experience, or do we grow our own talent and have a lifetime experience? And this is where I'm getting to with Sean, because we need to take that Scottish tradition, support our own, I think, rather than bring it in for a night or two. And that creates our sense, I believe, of Scottish American culture. And we have to evolve. One thing, as John mentioned, with the St. Andrew Society of Washington, D.C., we've had to listen. John started the tradition of bringing younger leaders. And we've had to evolve because of that. For example, we used to be a bunch of old military retired dudes, and we used to have twice a month. We had a lunch outside the downtown for 2 hours. We called it the lunch brunch. It literally died off. Instead, we now have happy hours downtown after work, because guess what? Our guys do work, and they do work downtown. So we had to adapt to that. And that now gets into the idea of leadership, because quite frankly, millennials are shaping our workplace. The millennials do not have a structured mission, focus, objective strategy, which really annoys me because I am CDO. This is my joke. I'm obsessive compulsive disorder, but with the letters arranged alphabetically as they should be. And so I've had to learn to let go, because millennials are more adept at decentralized, unstructured, crowdsourcing approach to getting things done. For example, our tartan ball. We have kind of a chairman, but we all kind of chip in. Everybody has something to do. And it gets done. In fact, our tartan ball this year, we didn't even send out invitations because it's already sold out through social media, because we've tapped people to do it a different kind of way. And as a president, I've learned not to have committees and chairmen, but to tap people to do a chunk, because millennials, younger people, do not want to take on a whole bunch of responsibility. But I'll do that. I'll do that. Now that takes more management to coordinate that. But that's how younger people work. And they do have work, they have families, they have interests, and it's a way of tapping it. So we can have a whole list of priorities, but know what? It's not going to happen unless you find a person attached to each of these things. And that's what I've learned from my predecessors, like John and other presidents. In fact, one of our predecessors would say, Bart, the best thing you say, if someone comes up with an idea, great. What can I do to help you take that on? And sometimes the priorities are shifted by who's willing to do what. So that's why we have to evolve our own thinking. Rather than getting young people to our events, working in our ways, go to where they are, see how they work, and see what motivates and inspires them, and support that. A few thoughts.
So yes, there's a lot of amazing talking going on this Sunday. I'm loving it. I'm living it. How do you follow that? I would say to start off, just because I really do like the idea of when you have a specific skill set, and I have a very specific skill set that I am constantly sharing with the younger generation and the older generation at the same time. I have adult students, I have young students, and so and then I also that's like on a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis. But then there's also the times where you get to go travel and take that, and I've done that all around the country. And what I've always noticed is, people are kids, adults. They're willing to learn about these things that these tunes from the 18th century Scottish music, and they fall in love with it. And I think it's just important to know what, like those kind of things, what people are going to like, what people are going to understand, and what unites everybody. So I think that music, of course, is a very uniting factor, builds community. For me, since that's what I know, it's my expertise, I would say just, think of how you can use that. Like, think of how people like me can help organizations to bring in the younger generation, the older generation, doesn't matter, just bring in people. And there are so many possibilities. It's not just, there isn't just like, okay, hire somebody to do this one event and that's good. There's so many ways to talk about it and figure out ways, like Megan was talking about having some of my CDs in her shop, which would benefit her because it's bringing this music into her store. I don't know if you sell CDs already, but people who, and it's just pretty much specifically Scottish. It's got a little bit of Irish music on it, but I mean, hey. And yes, and I think that things like that are a great idea because you're not only you're helping a lot of people out at that point. Like you're helping the artist out, you're supporting the artist, but you're also bringing the music to a larger audience, which from my experience, is quite hard to do. I mean, like, there's so much out there on social media. There's so much that people are just assaulted with every day when they open their phone and go on Facebook or whatever. And the more you can do to like specialize in those areas and bring in ideas like that, I think is great. So it's been a great time to be here. Love being here, and hope to come back again. Yes, it was. We had a good time.
Have you spoken from? Did you have a chance to comment? Okay.
That's not true. You're here. That's not true. I'm Peg Dunlap. I'm a past president, past games chair, past and current trustee. In other words, I'm old. I've been here a long time, and I think I've been in every office in the society, except I've never been finance chair, because the only thing I know about money is how to spend it. For a long time, I agree with everybody. You need to change the name of this conference. Now, you're going to tell me the gentleman came all the way from California and doesn't have a member in his group that has just as much enthusiasm as he does, but isn't here because they think they're not a leader. And that's been an ongoing problem. I kind of was thinking, a couple of words I liked from this weekend was Scots by inclination. I love that. But I'm thinking this could be the North American Scottish Initiative Conference. So we do have an initiative. This is our agenda. This is what we want to do. So I really think you need to be serious about changing the name somewhat. I might not have been to the first conference. I was president 2001 to 2003, but I for sure went in 2002, and I think it was the second conference. So they've been doing this 16 or 17 years. Conferences have always been wonderful. I get all fired up. I'd like to thank everybody that went out of their way to be here. One of the problems I see as we're trying to come together from all areas of North America is within our own groups, we all know we have our own problems and solutions and ideas. We have about 450 people. We always have about 450 people because every year we initiate 50 people, 60 people, and every year 50, 60 people fall by the wayside for a lot of things, moving, death, a lot of reasons, but the main reason is they just don't come back. And I think in our own St. Andrews, we need to make an effort is to at least contact people and see why not. The thing about doing the Scottish by inclination, although I think it's wonderful, wonderful, we just got this hall a few years ago. It seats about 170 people. If we were to open up our membership and not do Scots blood, as Megan says, you know, we'll get 2,000 people. We have 10, 11,000 people that come to our games. A lot of those people join. A lot of Polish people join. A lot of German people. I mean, they'll all join because they love it. What are we going to do? We meet once a month. All of a sudden, 600 people are going to want to come to our monthly meetings. Where? So, I mean, a lot of minor things to consider. Another thing, Megan, I'd like to say that when I did join, I was interested because I was married to a first-generation American. My in-laws are from Ayr. Of course, I love it. I mean, what couldn't be better than bagpipes and parades and things? I myself was born in Canada, so I'm a Canadian-American, eh? Or a Scottish-American, I had to go back 5 generations to find somebody that was born in Scotland. So both of my 5 generations grandparents back. When I came on board here, we voted, and you had to leave the room. I was almost not admitted because one of the current members, who was a first generation, or who was actually from Scotland, that was and still is, I believe, a member, said, "Are we just taking in anybody?" I mean, she has to go all that far back, so now we're just taking anybody that wants to join? Bad attitude. And I think that it just shows that my contribution to this organization, that's kind of silly. So if there's a Polish person out there or a Lebanese person out there that has just as much passion, you know, it kind of should be open. But on the other hand, that causes a whole new bag of worms, really. What do we want to be? And so within our own separate organizations, I think we have to decide what we want to be. And of course, we all want to be proud Scots. And a few years ago, the book, The Scots Invented the Modern World. No one knows about that except other Scots. No one knows. People are going to tell you so-and-so invented TV. I don't think so. It was a Scot. I mean, that book, to me, is mandatory reading for everybody in your family, the next generation in your family, and the generation, because that's what makes you proud to be a Scot, is our contribution to the world. So, just rambling, and I don't really have any solutions, but I think the only thing, really, we need to change the name of this if it's going to continue on and to be more effective to cover more people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Scots invented the modern world?
Can I just, Peg, thank you very much. That book actually speaks very powerfully to something that John and I just spoke about. The book is called How the Scots Invented the Modern World and Everything in It, as if that's not enough.
That's true, right. Mm-hmm.
It's not called that. If you pick up that book in Scotland, it's called something entirely different, the title. The reason is, it's simply called much more demurely, the Scottish Enlightenment. That says something, that there is a difference between Scottish Americans and Scots. In America, it's great to toot our own horn and to say what Scots have done for the world and to be proud and so on. But in Scotland, there's a cultural thing that perhaps doesn't accept that quite as much. So I think, in a nutshell, you've hit on something there, Peg, that gets to the point that John was making. There is a difference between Scots in Scotland and Scottish Americans. There is a difference. I like to say that in Scotland, if you walk past a big house and you're with an American, the American might say, "One day I'm going to live in that big house." And the Scot would reply, "One day I'm going to get the bugger that lives in that big house."
So true.
Emma, thank you very much on behalf of all of us who've come here, to you, your board, your members, and everyone at the Detroit Scots. Thank you for having us.
I think our president, I'm not sure. Ron, did you want to say something, or I was going to let Emma wrap it up?
Oh, sorry.
He is. Yes, very active and very helpful in our group. So I'm going to give this to Emma. She's our president and my friend, and she's got just a couple of things to say.
With my Viking heritage, I posted a Facebook last night as I was driving back from the hospital in Sterling Heights, and it was there was a Viking warrior. They finally proven that it was a female, and I said I'd like to introduce everybody to my great-great-great-great-grandmother, or great-great-great. Before I start my little speech here, I want to say I loved everybody's comments. The thing that I'm fixated on is the fact that Doug said that he's not a leader. And that really bugged me because Doug is on our communications committee. Without him, we wouldn't have our updated websites. Same with Rod. I mean, there are people that sit on our committees and do the lion's share of the work around here, and those are our leaders. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. And thank God for people like Doug. So never say that to me again, please. Just the continued efforts of our community, I think of as my community, John and Mickey and Patty, my sisters, Mickey and Patty, everybody that put this on. I just appreciate it so much. This is important work. I constantly say that if you want to know what your values are, this is not an original thought, by the way. If you want to know what your values are and what means the most to you in your life, there are two really easy books that everybody has that you can look at and read, and that's your date book and your checkbook. Where you spend your time and where you spend your money is where your heart lies. And there are so many people that do so much work here for the St. Andrews Society of Detroit, and that's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and some money once in a while. So as far as the conference is concerned, I've spent a lot of my life in nonprofits or the public sector, a lot of time working with both youth, which it's not my favorite thing. Kids come to me like cats go around people that are allergic, and they're just drawn to me, and I think it's because I'm just really, I don't understand them, and now I have 9 grandchildren, and it's like, my God. Bring them to me when they have reason. And the other thing that I've always worked with in my life are returning citizens, and those are people that are getting out of jail and need help reestablishing themselves in order to avoid recidivism, to go back into jail because they don't have a job or they don't have a community. Believe it or not, those two things are similar in nature, the nurturing and the step-by-step processes that are required. And what I find in both of those passions of mine, or my outreach, is that you have to have a plan. You have to kind of know how to communicate in different ways to different people, and you cannot expect that everything's going to work out for you all the time. Actually, being Scottish, that's our family motto. Don't expect that things are going to work out for you. Okay, so as a temporary leader here at the St. Andrews Society of Detroit, I do have a more limited short-term view of what I need to do. I'm a planner. I'm a person that likes to make a list, and then I'm very satisfied when I can check off the boxes on those lists. Sometimes my empathy, people have to pull me back in on the empathetic side of those things, because list makers aren't generally the sweetest, softest people in the world. But I believe that we need to offer a public overview to what we do, to our activities, much like the Games as a model. The Games is our premier event. So the Games as a model, anybody could come. If we had a workshop here on Scottish dress, anybody could come. Open it up to the public, charge them or make it free, whatever. But staying to our mission of relieve the distressed, and staying to the membership of a Scottish society. I'm not going to get into whether we should use DNA or, birth certificates or whatever. We have a membership secretary that takes care of that for us. This Scottish by inclination, I think, I love the term too. It's, it's sexy. It's, it gets you, it's compelling. But I think that's for events I don't think it's like I don't think it's a membership in the society thing. And I also don't think that we're a racist society, and I can have more discussions with you about that later. I think that racism is a completely different idea than having a heritage cultural group. When Doug started talking about the two men in the woods, I thought he was going to steal one of my favorite stories, but he didn't. And that is, the man's walking through the woods, and he sees this guy out there just working on, like, cutting down these trees and sawing these logs into pieces. He's like, oh my God, you've got like so much work to do. And he's like, oh my God, I can't stop sawing these logs. I got to get this done. There's a pile that needs to be done. And the newcomer to the situation said, man, you're using, like, your saw is really dull. He's like, I know, it's taking me forever. And the newcomer says, well, why don't you stop for a minute and sharpen your saw? Oh, I can't. I got all these logs to finish. I think that's what we need to do, is sharpen this saw. We need to stop and take a minute, because I'm not here to see how hard I can work, all right? My husband's a union guy. He taught me that a long time ago. I am not here to see how hard I can work. I'm here to see how we can most work effectively with each other to get things done that advance our mission, advance our society, and provide support to those who need it, whether they're Scottish or whether they're not Scottish. Let me see. I wrote notes on a napkin here.
She hasn't done that since she was young and used to take phone numbers.
Young. Oh, this is from last night. Oh, wait. Another thing, as far as the model, we have our fish fry nights here. It's, everybody volunteers, we work hard, we have a lot of fun, and everybody comes. And we always seem so delighted that everybody came. They're not even members. Look at all these people that came. That's kind of what I'm thinking some of our other events could be like. So I just wanted to say that. And then what's the last thing I have? Oh, and of course, St. Andrew's Society of Detroit gives our benevolence money both through our scholarship fund and the money that Kathy and her team raises at the games. That all goes to scholarships for cultural arts, dance, music, fiddle, drums, pipers, Highland dance. That's what it's for. So, we do that. Thank you all very, very much for being here. John, kudos to you. You can't take it away from me yet. Okay. What? Oh, Mickey, and then this is my sister, Mickey, and
hey, Mickey.
Thank God for Mickey.
Thank you for everything, Mickey.
I would also like to say thank you to all of you for coming. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I try to make it as comfortable as possible. Sorry about the coolness in here, but apparently last night they turned it down and didn't tell me they were turning it down, so it takes a long time to warm this room up. I would also like to recommend, I've been to these several now, take out the word leadership. I stood up at our last monthly meeting and explained to them that it is leadership, yes, but I have met so many wonderful people that have come to these. We've had 3 of them now, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them. I mean, we've become friends, and I think this weekend is what happens. You become friends with some of the people who attend. When they see leadership, oh, that's not me. Yeah. I'm not a leader. So I really, really think that should be changed. Also, the last 3, 4 have been, how can we bring in the next generation? I know that's what everybody wants to do, and we are working towards it in all of our groups, but the numbers that we've had here have dwindled every time we've held it here. And I think people are tired of hearing, how do we get the next generation involved? We need to have something that's a grabbing title. We need to have somebody that's here that younger people would like to meet, would like to see, would like to interact with, something. But not how do we get the next generation involved.
So you want to be a Scottish Jedi?
Yeah, I thought that was fantastic. Yes, yes, something like that. Because it's just not happening, you know? I mean, we're down, well, we had 55 for dinner, and we've had 80 to 100.
We call it ScotCon, and we have a night of cosplay and a flash mob.
Thank you.
There you are. Bob wanted to say a couple of things. He started and wanted to include a couple of thoughts he had as the microphone was going round. Bob.
I kind of cut it short just to make sure everyone got something to say, but a couple of things that I thought were going to be mentioned and were not, and that is that whole concept of bringing the alumni together. I think that's a great opportunity for each and every one of us, and I think we can't lose sight of that. That was mentioned a couple times. Having the meeting in Washington, I'd like to let go of that one too. Again, that's a good opportunity for us on that level. I think that each of us maybe needs to go back to our organizations and develop a young Scottish leadership council within our organizations. Maybe not call it that, but at least have young people get together and discuss issues amongst themselves that become a broader platform for the whole group, each and every group. And one thing about the YouTube, and that is I have a YouTube channel, and it's a great way of connecting to people you'll never understand that you're connecting to. Some of my videos get up to 300,000 views, but it takes time for that. And we can't look at that as something, 2 weeks from now, well, only 100 people looked at it. It was a failure. The thing percolates, and you have to look at it over a long period of time. And so when we look at those YouTube channels and we see how many views you've had for each of those things, don't think that it's a bad thing. It's a good thing. It'll be there forever, and we need to understand that that's going to be something that's going to always underscore what we're doing here and how good this whole event has been. Yeah. Oh yes. And one thing at the very end, we need to tell people who review that how to contact us. If you want more information, this is how you get to these folks.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thanks for everyone's comments. There are a couple of things that I heard very loudly and clearly. One is about the word leadership in our title. And I think if John, Camilla, Maggie, and I can have a call, we can perhaps come up with some thoughts and some suggestions about whether the replacement of the word leadership is something that would serve to... Dave, yes, please, yes.
All right. Sure. Test. Got this on. Okay. All right. Here we go. There we go. So to feed that conversation that you want to have, it may not be the word leadership. That word may not be the issue because it does bring together leadership. It brings it, as was mentioned to me. Is there any Scottish American organization that is the overarching leadership organization for North America, Canada, and the United States? And well, you say no, but maybe this is it. We have the leader of the clans here. We have the leader of Tartan Day here. We have the leader of the American Scottish Society here. We have other leaders here that are from large, significant Scottish American organization, so maybe this is that overarching body. So maybe the leadership term is appropriate. Maybe it's appropriate. Maybe it's not. Maybe we change that to mentoring council. I don't know, mentor board or something, or just board. Thoughts for you all. But as was also observed to me, the topic, as was mentioned over there by the wonderful lady over there, has not changed for the last 3 or 4 years. As she said, I know this is only my first time, but the observation for someone who's been here, the topic's not changed. It's still how to bring in the younger generation. Okay, well, great. Well, let's talk about that for maybe 1 or 2 years, do something about it, and then move on and talk about another topic that supports that end goal, but it talks more to the how do we get there? What specifically, tangibly do we do? Thoughts for you?
No formal association of Scottish organisations. There are of clans, and of course John gives leadership to COSCA. There are similar organisations for games and pipe bands, but of all the community, this, and I use the word conference. Conference is a meeting, you know. It's not an association. It's not an organisation in and of itself. And if we were to become one, that is something different from what this meeting was intended to do and be. And I'm not suggesting that we don't form an association. I think we would all benefit by doing that. In fact, one of these sessions, the most valuable sessions we've had at this conference from a few years ago, we brought in people from the outside who aren't part of the Scottish American community. And Byrne said it best, you know, the gift he gave us to see ourselves as others see us. You know, if you see what you are from the perspective of an onlooker, it can be more useful than navel gazing. So we had the head of Rotary International, which is headquartered in Chicago, come and speak to us about how Rotary clubs can retain their autonomous missions and purposes, but come together for the greater good. There's some great lessons in there. That's a heavy lift, you know, to corral all these organizations, Scots being Scots, you know. It would be very difficult. I aspire to do that, though. I think that's something that will benefit us all.
But then again, now that you put it that way, I agree that maybe creating an organization is not required. This conference, which is an organization in and of itself, even though it doesn't have that mnemonic in its name, that's probably fine because this serves as an organization. So I think the conference title is probably just fine. Maybe we need to just recognize that this appears to be the overarching gathering, if you will, focal point for all those different defined organizations.
Could I offer a last thought from me, at least?
Thanks, John.
I'm struck by the fact that most people seem to think that the word leadership is off-putting. And if it is, we need to deal with that.
Yep.
I just want to let people know that my understanding was that it was never meant to be a meeting of elected or appointed leaders, but a meeting of opinion leaders.
Yes.
And Scots are very egalitarian people. Everybody has an opinion, and everybody here has an informed opinion. We don't all agree, and that's fine. But you're all opinion leaders, self-selected opinion leaders by being here. And that's what this conference is supposed to be. Now, if the wording is a source of misunderstanding and off-putting, we need to deal with that.
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be open and inclusive, and we need to make sure it is.
And Scots are very good at understanding how you leverage that. And you leverage it best when you're an opinion leader that does not designate themselves as leader. Mm-hmm. You know, we understand that we best exercise our power from the floor as opposed from the podium. So we cherish the notion that we're not a leader, even though we speak as a leader. If you understand the notion, that's why we never want to consider ourselves as a leader. So we avoid being designated as one because we want the power of the floor. And so that's, I think, what happens in that context. So we just need to deal with it. You know, if I might, Gus, I did detect something very interesting. And I think John really kind of hit on a very important part. And this may be, you know, there is what we need to avoid is a distinction between American and North American. This is a North American discussion. But there is a tendency among us Americans to view this thing in an American perspective. And right now, as Americans, what we're seeing politically is a tendency to be very tribal. And when we're confronted with a tribal reaction, we say, well, you know what? You know, we're Scots, and our perspective, you know, if you're going to be tribal, we're going to be tribal. But, you know, at the outset, I think Gus made an important piece that the Scottish way to be tribal here is a community way. In other words, we are distinctively Scot, but we understand that while we're distinctively Scot, that means we bring distinctive gifts to a community that enriches the broader community. We don't use our distinctive gifts to wall ourselves off from the community, but we use our distinctive gifts to enhance the community. It's an act of contribution. And I think it's important for us on the American side of that discussion to understand that in this time of tribal politics, that we need to be reminding others who exercise that there is a way to be proud of your ethnic and tribal roots, but respective of the broader community. And that's the distinctive thing that I think we can offer. That's not really related to what we need to do next year, but I think, John, I think that's what you're saying, that we don't want to lose sight of our distinctive position, because we can make a pretty important contribution if we respect who we are.
I think you're absolutely right, John. What we will do is we will reconvene as the committee representing the organizations who are co-hosts to look at the name of the conference. We will come back with a theme, and if I could get a copy of your vision and mission, I really appreciate that, Dave. There's been so much happened over the course of this weekend, particularly the music we played last night. It was really inspiring. I want to thank each one of you for coming, and as John rightly said, as leading with opinions of your own. This conference was started to be inclusive. There were other meetings that were just for elected officials of Scottish organisations. This conference was started so that others who weren't presidents, secretaries, treasurers, people who weren't even part of St Andrew and Caledonian clubs could attend and have their opinions be heard, be respected. And so for those of us in the room who perhaps have clashing and different opinions, I appreciate you representing what you feel in your heart, because if we truly are to benefit from the energy and opinions of our constituents, we have to be respectful of them. So, John, I'm going to hand the microphone back to you with thanks to everyone who has been, particularly, let's thank the guys behind the computers again. Really appreciate it. Thanks to our co-hosts and our warm welcome that we have here. I'm good. Actually, I have one more thought, John. Our organization in Chicago, I talked about the Scottish Way. We've gone through some branding exercises that have really caused us to see ourselves as others see us, to take a really deep dive and to define down to the most basic and simple fundamental essence what our organization is. The purpose we're doing that is to stop this rift between elder care and culture. You may notice that our logo has changed. Our logo is now the Lucken Booth, which is two hearts symbolically coming together. Those two hearts could be resident and caregiver. They could also be two generations coming together, but they could be culture and elder care. Now, when I wrote our long-term strategic plan that resulted in the development of the Caledonian House model for people living with Alzheimer's, I was given a box full of strategic plans that the organization had written for 50 years. And my chairman said, read them all, talk to as many people as you can, spend some time with people who don't agree with what these say. Are there common themes? But listen to yourself, take some time to write a strategic plan that feels right for this organization. And I drove myself almost to the brink of insanity, trying to write a strategic plan for an organization that did caber tossing and whiskey tasting, skilled nursing, and Alzheimer's care. What is it that pulls all those things together? Well, I found something. I found two things. The St. Andrew's Society in Chicago, equally true of Detroit or wherever you may be, they exist to bring something of Scotland to wherever you may be, to bring something of home. They do so for the benefit of kith and kin, of family. Now, those two things are distinctively, to use John's word, part of our DNA as the Chicago Scots, and I would suggest they're part of all our organization's DNA, family and home. What two things are most important to stop people feeling commodified when they enter long-term care? It's a sense of being with people, being with family, and having a sense of home. Those two things tied both sides of our organization together. And if you want to say it even more simply, when you're away from home or you can no longer live at home, an organization like ours exists to support your life. There's something in there that I think we can all benefit by, and I offer that to us all as a kind of parting thought. Let's come together again. Maybe in a year, we'll come forward with a date, a place, a time, and a theme. But I thank you all for participating so thoughtfully and energetically. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Gus. Thank you for your efforts this morning. We do know this, that the technology gives us a great potential to do some good things next year as we put this conference together. Please travel safe as you go to your home, wherever it might be. We've circulated a pad for names and email addresses. It's back here. If you haven't signed it, make sure you do, so that we can share it with everyone, so that you have the opportunity to stay in contact. There have been some good suggestions that that we stay in contact, perhaps by a potential, I don't want to call it a newsletter, but at least some sort of information piece periodically to let you know where we're at, as John and Gus and Camilla and Maggie and I have some conversation and develop some direction. At least you have some idea what that is, and you can provide some degree of feedback. That might be helpful for us as we move along. So keep your eyes on that. And again, thank you for coming and helping make this a success. So thank you very much. Oh, yes. Adjourned.